So, thank you everyone for coming. I didn't expect such a full room. Just a few points I'd like to make before I start. One is if there's any questions at any point, please just feel free to ask. The answer might come up later in the presentation, but I'd rather you don't forget your question, so just ask when you think of the question. The second thing is, I'm in no way authorized to give a presentation on the Baha'i Faith. So don't take anything that I say as being the truth and nothing but the truth. There's a principle in Baha'i Faith which is the independent investigation of truth. So please go and look up anything that you wish. There's plenty of information on the internet. Wikipedia is partly accurate. There's Baha'i websites at baha'i.org, baha'i.org.uk, and most other international country domains. A third thing is there will be a few quotations from the writings of the Baha'i Faith. If we could just go in order and read, if we don't have a problem with reading, if we do, just skip and the next person could read, so we hear a few different voices except for mine during the presentation. I'll start with a bit of history on the 19th century and then introducing the Baha'i Faith. Then I'll go on talking about a few of the important personages for us in the Baha'i Faith. And I'll end after that with a few principles of the Baha'i Faith and the administration of the Baha'i Faith, what we do as Baha'is, what we believe. One point, I've never used this program before. I saw someone using it, it looked really cool. So if it goes wrong, please excuse me. So, there we are.
Is everything?
Yeah,
it just happens every few minutes. It's fun.
So start talking about Baha'u'llah. Oh, sorry, not quite. Let's see. That's where I start. So in the 19th century, people from various religious backgrounds were expecting the coming of the promised one of their religion. For example, Christians were awaiting the return of Jesus Christ, the second coming. We read in many different places in the Bible references to the second coming, as in Matthew when he says, "When the Son of Man shall come in his glory." There's other places where there are references to Jesus coming in the glory of his Father again. Templars were a denomination of Christians who stood up from Germany and they went and established various colonies in Israel, one of which was at the foot of Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel is in Haifa, Israel, and it is the current seat of the Baha'i World Center. This is one of the buildings that is part of the Spiritual Baha'i World Center. And as you can see down the road, all those buildings were built by the Templars awaiting the return of Christ on Mount Carmel, according to the prophecies which had been made in the Bible. They had worked out the approximate date and time, which turned out to be not too bad. Islam, everyone in Islam was awaiting or is still awaiting the coming of the promised one. Sunni Islam, they're awaiting the coming of Mahdi, which means the guided one. Shia Islam, they're waiting for the Qa'im, or the 12th Imam. He who will arise is what it means. The Shaykhi school of thought was an Islamic sect, and they were awaiting the Mahdi and the Masih, the return of Christ, in the middle of the 19th century. Sheikh Ahmad Isa'i, who was the founder of the school, taught his disciples that the promised one was about to come in the beginning of the 19th century. And in 1843, his successor passed away, divulging all of his disciples to go and look for the promised one. Other religions also have promises, as in Buddhism. Buddhists are awaiting the fifth Buddha, the Buddha Maitreya, who will free the world from all evil. Hinduism, all believers are awaiting the reincarnation of Krishna, who is the founder of Hinduism. And Zoroastrians are awaiting the coming of Shah Bahram, who will differentiate between the evil and the good. So now I'll start talking a bit about the Baha'i Faith. I'll first start mentioning Baha'u'llah, who is the founder of the Baha'i Faith. Baha'u'llah means glory of God. It's an Arabic title. We believe that he's the promised one of all the religions of the past. Baha'u'llah was born in Tehran in 1817. Tehran is the capital of Iran at the time, the capital of the Persian Empire. He never attended school. he was homeschooled for a few years. He came from a noble family, very well standing. His father was one of the favorite ministers of the Shah of Iran. The Shah was the emperor, the king of Iran. At a very young age, at the age of 22, his father passed away, and he was offered a very high position in the court of the king to take the place of his father. He refused this position as he wanted to dedicate his life to helping others, to uplifting the poor and healing the sick. So there's two main aspects to the life of Baha'u'llah which I would like to mention. The first of these is the suffering that he underwent. Baha'u'llah's sufferings began in the moment when he arose to proclaim the cause of God, when he laid a claim to revelation from God. He was put in chains in a dark and dismal dungeon in Tehran, known as the Siyah Chal. This used to be the water reservoir for the court of the king. It had a very bad smell, and the worst criminals of the Persian Empire were held in there. He was later exiled to Baghdad, where he stayed until 1863, at which point he was summoned to come to Constantinople to meet the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Unfortunately, this was only a scheming of some of the ministers of Iran who were trying to exile Baha'u'llah as far from Iran as possible due to his growing influence on the people. So after Constantinople, he was exiled to Adrianople, and finally he was sent to Akka or Acre, which is in today's Israel. That day, it was the worst prison city in all of the Ottoman Empire. There's a saying, people used to say, if a bird flies over Akka, it will drop dead because of the foul smell. This is a picture of the window of the cell where Baha'u'llah was imprisoned. He lived there for the end of his life. While still officially a prisoner towards the end of his life, the governor, the clerics of the city, and all the local inhabitants saw the influence that Baha'u'llah had had on that city. And they understood that the decree that had been set by the Sultan was actually illegitimate, and that Baha'u'llah was not an evil person as he was described. At that point, the clergy actually begged of Baha'u'llah to go and live in a mansion outside the precincts of Akka rather than in his prison cell. So this is the first quotation where Baha'u'llah describes the purpose of him in undergoing all this suffering. If we could start somewhere in the first row, someone reading it, please.
Sarah does not have her glasses with her.
The ancient beauty had consented to be bound with chains that mankind may be released from its bondage, and had accepted to be made a prisoner within this most mighty stronghold that the whole world may attain unto true liberty. He had drained to its dregs the cup of sorrow, that all the peoples of the earth may attain unto abiding joy, and be filled with gladness. This is of the mercy of your Lord, the compassionate, the most merciful. We have accepted to be abased, O believers in the unity of God, that ye may be exalted, and have suffered manifold afflictions, that ye might prosper and flourish. He who hath come to build anew the whole world, behold, how they that have joined partners with God have forced him to dwell within the most desolate of cities.
Thank you very much. So we see that the reason behind the sufferings that Baha'u'llah underwent, he describes as being very similar as what Christ says about him dying on the cross. The other aspect of Baha'u'llah's life that I would like to mention briefly, and these two aspects can be seen in all the lives of the prophets or the messengers of God, the founders of the major world religions. One was suffering, and the next one is the influence that they all exerted on the people who surrounded them. So wherever Baha'u'llah went, wherever he was exiled and banished, he always showed a loving kindness which overcame the hatred in the hearts of the people incited by the government. And very soon, as we saw actually in the end of his life, he was set free, although officially still a prisoner. Baha'u'llah continued to reveal what we believe as Baha'is to be the Word of God. For more than 40 years, he revealed the equivalent of over 100 volumes, and many of his writings have been translated into hundreds of languages all over the world. Baha'u'llah passed away in 1892. Sorry about that.
Just
Yeah? I think it's about to come. I think this is a computer board. Anyway, we can see the small picture.
And it happens in every time we use the projection.
No, there's no.
But just
Let
like
me
we
just
can
try.
see at least part of it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, there we go, there we go. Okay, thank you. So Baha'u'llah passed away in 1892, and that was a picture of the house in which his remains lay. It's the most holy spot for the Baha'is all over the world, and it's a place of pilgrimage for all of us. I'm going to talk briefly about the Bab. He can be seen as St. John was for Christians. He was the gate to the knowledge of God and to what we believe as a new era in human existence. Thousands upon thousands of people in Iran and Iraq, at the time the Persian Empire, accepted the message of the Bab and they began to follow and promote his teachings. Unfortunately, the government saw this as a threat. Many of the teachings were revolutionary. For example, equality of men and women, or compulsory education for all. We have to remember that this was Iran 150 years ago, a very conservative country, highly Islamic. So the Bab himself was one of the 20,000 martyrs who fell for this message, which Bab claimed that he brought from God. He was trying to pave the way for the coming of Baha'u'llah. The picture again, which is a bit dark now, it shows the Baha'i center, and the shrine on the left is the shrine of the Bab, where his remains lay. These are just a few more pictures from the Baha'i World Center in Haifa in Israel on Mount Carmel. And this is a picture of the garden surrounding the house, the shrine in which the remains of Baha'u'llah lay today. I'm going to move on and talk a bit about God and our relationship with Him from the point of view of Baha'is. We believe that God is unknowable. We believe that even as a carpenter makes a table, the table is incapable of understanding the essence of the carpenter. We believe that God created everything that we see around us. He created you, He created me, He created the valleys, the mountains, and the animals. And we believe that the reason why God created us is that He loved us.
Yeah. O son of a man, I love thee, creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thee, thy name, and fill thy soul with spirit of life.
Sorry about those. This is written in an old English style. Thy means you or your, the, more or less the same. It's just it's used in different grammatical contexts. As Baha'is, we believe in what is called what we term the eternal covenant. It comes up also in other religions. It is a covenant we believe that has been established between God and mankind. In this case, mankind did not have a choice in entering this covenant. It's as a child that enters school, he is entering into an agreement, into a covenant with the headmaster of the school without knowingly doing so. A child of 5 years does not understand what he is committing to the first day that he enters the doors of the school. We believe that there are two parts to the eternal covenant. One is God and one is mankind. God promises that He will never leave us alone. He will always send someone to guide us. We, on the other hand, have to obey by the teachings that God sends us. We believe that God sends manifestations or messengers of God from time to time. Every time that mankind turns away from God and forgets His teachings, we believe that God sends one of His manifestations. The word manifest means to reveal or to make known something that was not known before. Manifestations of God, we believe, are like clean mirrors that reflect the light of the sun being God. So we believe that whatever the manifestations of God, such as Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Moses, Buddha, Krishna, the Bab, Baha'u'llah, reveal, is the word of God Himself. So as I mentioned, in the eternal covenant, God promises never to leave us alone without guidance. We believe that all the founders of the major world religions come from God and have brought His word. Abraham, Buddha, Zoroaster, Krishna, Moses, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah will come up in a second. So as I said, we believe that God sends someone to guide us every time that we turn away from Him and forget His teachings. This translates into a world which is not imbued with love and kindness. If you look around us, I'm sure you'll all agree that we see wars, we see an economic crisis, political instability. If we look at society, we'll see moral decadence, materialism, and inequality, be this of race, of gender, or creed. Is it maybe time for a new manifestation? We believe that the Bab, the gate, who prepared the way for Baha'u'llah's coming, are both twin manifestations of God for this day and age.
This is the day in which God's most excellent favors have been poured out upon man. The day in which His most mighty grace have been infused into all created things. It is incumbent upon all the peoples of the world to reconcile their differences and, with perfect unity and peace, abide beneath the shadow of the tree of His care and loving kindness.
Thank you. And Baha'u'llah does not make a claim for the final revelation. We believe, slightly wrong there. We believe that in the future more manifestations of God will come to lead the way. So what is the aim of the Bahá'í Faith? It is world unity. Baha'u'llah has said that he has come to unify the world. He teaches that we are all as fruits of one tree and leaves of one branch. We can think of mankind as a garden full of flowers of different colors. The beauty of the garden lies in the variety of the colors, shapes, and smells of these flowers. You can imagine a garden filled with white roses. I do not believe that it has the same beauty as does a garden full of different flowers. Yes, please.
Is that the reason that every temple from the Baha'is is so decorated with like elaborate gardens?
We believe
Is an analogy or?
it might be one of the reasons. I do not know for sure whether it is or not, but it's a valid point. For us, all the Baha'i temples are places of worship, and we try to beautify them as much as possible, as that is where people go to pray to God. And beauty and perfection are two very highly regarded attributes.
Baha'u'llah has drawn the circle of unity. He has made a design for the uniting of all the peoples and for the gathering of them, all under the shelter of the tent of universal unity. This is the work of the divine bounty, and we must all strive with heart and soul until we have the reality of unity in our midst. As we work, so will strength be given unto us.
So unifying the world is no easy task. And to many it may sound as a utopia. But we believe that that is what the world needs nowadays. And I'm sure many Baha'is or not Baha'is will agree with this idea.
Especially me.
I'll talk briefly about Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha was the son of Baha'u'llah. He was his eldest son and was appointed as his successor upon the passing of Baha'u'llah. It is the first time that a manifestation of God has in writing clearly stated who his successor will be. In all the religions of the past, there has been schism arising as soon as the messenger of God has passed away. In Islam, this led to the creation of Sunni, Shi'i, and nowadays many other sects. In Christianity, the same thing happened. Admittedly, it began and is still going on. I think there's tens or hundreds of sects being formed every day in the United States of America who all belong to Christianity. Baha'u'llah protected his faith by appointing the successor, who was the interpreter of his words. So Baha'is from all over the world who had any questions about what the exact meaning of a verse was would refer to Abdul Baha in order to get clarification. We have got many of these recorded by his secretaries, or by Abdul Baha himself, and that is what Baha'is refer to nowadays as well. For us, Abdul Baha was a perfect exemplar of the Baha'i teachings. He embodied love and kindness, justice, and these were all qualities that we can learn from him and his life. So the covenant of Baha'u'llah was between Baha'u'llah and his followers, and as opposed to the covenant of God, which we believe is between God and mankind. Okay, I thought this might happen. There we go. So now I'll talk briefly about Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith. He was the grandson of Abdul Baha, and thus the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah. He was the head of the faith after the passing of Abdul Baha. Again, Abdul Baha had, in written, said that Shoghi Effendi would be his successor. Once Shoghi Effendi passed away, there was no single person head of faith. And Baha'u'llah, in his most holy book, the Kitab al-Aqdas, which can be likened unto the Bible for Christians or the Quran for Muslims, had specified how the administration of the faith would continue in the future. So now all over the world, in every locality where 9 or more Baha'is of age over 21 reside, they elect a body known as Local Spiritual Assembly. This is a yearly election and is done without propaganda and in the spiritual atmosphere. Being a member of such an assembly does not grant any privileges or authority. It is rather a position of servitude unto the community. The same thing happens nationally. In each nation, a body consisting of 9 Baha'is is elected every year. And once every 5 years, the Universal House of Justice is elected in Haifa in Israel. For us, the Universal House of Justice is a body, is a supreme body, is infallible, and brings the word of God to us. The members of the House of Justice, again, do not hold any authority. And this should be a picture, of an international convention, which is when the Universal House of Justice is elected. This was in 2008. As you can see, there's Baha'is from all over the world. Usually, all 9 members of the National Spiritual Assemblies come to elect the Universal House of Justice.
Sorry? How many Baha'i believers are there in total all across the world?
Around the world at the moment, there's about 6 or 7 million. It is not a huge number, but considering it is a very new religion, it's barely 170 years old, not even. And we do not proselytize, nor do we enforce our opinions on others. So every person who has become a Baha'i has done so of his own volitions. And we do not see numbers as being a hindrance. You only need 1 candle to light all the candles in the world. And by spreading the word of God, person by person, we believe that world unity will be realized. Any other questions at this point? No? Okay. So I'll talk a bit about the teachings and principles which Baha'u'llah has brought. He tells us that we should observe his commandments for love of his beauty, not from fear of punishment, as many religious institutions in the past have taught their followers. So what do we as Baha'is believe? Baha'u'llah prohibits backbiting and calumny. This is a cause of disunity, as I'm sure you'll all agree. If you talk bad about someone else in their absence and they do the same when you're not there, it will not lead to unity. Baha'u'llah prohibits the drinking of alcohol and substance abuse, by which is meant drugs and other mind-altering substances. I believe this is for a good reason. It takes away the innate station of man, which is that of being able to reason. And when you take substances which alter your ability to reason, you're not a dignified human being any longer during that time. Another principle of Baha'i Faith is the obligation to educate children. Now this applies both to male and to female children. Actually, Baha'u'llah specifies that if a family has more than 1 child and is unable to pay to educate both of them, female children take priority. He says this is because females will be the mothers of the coming generation, and they are the ones that have to be educated so as to best raise their children in the future. Another principle is the equality of men and women. This does not mean equality in all their roles, but it means equality in all their rights. I'm sorry, I forgot there were a few quotations. So this one is about backbiting.
I could read the previous ones, not this one, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, sorry, the script is quite small, so anyone with good eyes in the audience, please.
O companion of my throne, hear no evil, and see no evil. Abase not thyself, neither sigh and weep. Speak no evil, that thou mayest not hear it spoken unto thee. And magnify not the faults of others, that thine own faults may not appear great. And wish not the abasement of anyone, that thine own abasement be exposed. Live then the days of thy life, that are less than a fleeting moment, with thy mind stainless, thy heart